Hello, and welcome to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate try to make sense of things we wish we were qualified in instead. Quick disclaimer before we get started, we don't claim to be experts in any of the fields we'll be discussing, so while everything we say will be based on individual research, this is just a bit of fun, and we suggest that you take everything we say with a pinch of salt. I'm Martha, I'm the drama student.
And I'm the other Martha, the film graduate.
So, Martha, what are we going to be discussing today?
We are going to be talking about alleged lovers of queens that betrayed them. I say alleged because I don't like the great name of Elizabeth besmirched.
Yeah, I don't really mind.
Was the Virgin Queen.
That's true. I'm talking about Rasputin. I really don't mind him being besmirched a little bit, but
Rasputin wasn't the Virgin Queen.
He was not the Virgin Queen. There were many, many ways in which he was not the Virgin Queen, and I'll delve into that when we get to my bit. But do you want to start by telling me about your story?
Yes, but I do think that Rasputin should be given the title the Virgin Queen, actually.
I think it would be up for significant debate against things like the devil himself, which he was thought to be by many a party. Anyway, tell me about Essex, Martha.
The second Earl of Essex, Robert Devereux, one of history's proudest idiots, I like to call him. Quote me on that in your essays if you like.
I will, thank you. He comes up in drama all the time.
Well, no, not you. I'm talking about all the people listening.
I'm sorry, I forget we're not just having a chat.
Robert Devereux, Essex, as he shall be known henceforth, because I am not good at pronouncing his name, was born in 1567, 9 years into the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. So when he was 9 years old, he became the Earl of Essex, the poorest earl in England. You can feel sorry for him, right. But however sorry you feel for him, he felt more sorry for himself. Guaranteed.
Yeah, fair enough.
So sure. Essex's mother, Lettice Knowles,
what a good name,
remarried Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, the Queen's favourite. I don't know if this is true. I read it in a very old book. Not all of this. Hopefully some of it will be true. Published, I think, around the 1930s.
Wow, fair.
Called Elizabeth and Essex by Lytton Strachey. And then
what lovely names all the people in this story have.
Well, welcome to the Tudors. And then I also backed some of it up with reading Elizabeth's Forgotten Years by John Guy. But John Guy, please don't come for me, because while I did read some of the sentences you wrote, I don't claim that any of this is your words. Yeah. Do you think John will be okay with that?
I reckon so. Mine's mainly Wikipedia, so...
Well, I had the books, so...
Yeah,
anyway,
why not?
Lytton told me that Elizabeth's nickname for Leicester was Eyes. Don't know why he was called Eyes, but that was his name. Being the stepson of Leicester meant that Essex had a potentially great career at court. Yeah. Not only this, but he was allegedly very good looking and everyone fancied him, including the author of the book that I read. Allegedly, no tea, no shade to Lytton.
Not at all.
So Essex soon became one of the Queen's favourites. They were rarely apart. She was 53 and Essex barely even 20. I've misphrased that. He wasn't even 20. He was a teenager.
Okay, to clarify, does favourite in this context mean implied lover?
So in May 1587, all was well. They would ride through the gardens together and they would play cards well into the night.
Okay, so, I see what you're saying.
Yes. A contemporary gossip said, "My lord cometh not to his own lodging till birds sing in the morning."
Now that's a lot of cards.
Yes, and in the book it's like they played cards and other sorts of games until the early hours of the morning, and I was like, okay,
gotta love that charades. I mean, it gets wild.
There is suggestion that he was spending the night in her chambers alone. It might have been completely innocent, we don't know, we weren't there. However, Elizabeth never gave Essex a nickname. Poor Essex, which meant that she didn't like him very much. She'd sometimes call him Robin, but it wasn't a proper nickname like Eyes. So I want to tell you about a couple of fun events that happened throughout their relationship, just to give you a bit of context about what they had going on with one another.
Okay, great.
They all, and by they I mean Walter Raleigh, Queen Elizabeth I, the Earl of Essex, and the Earl of Essex's disgraced sister, Lady Dorothy.
Truly them all.
Yes, went on a little jolly to Lord and Lady Warwick's house. Elizabeth didn't like Dorothy because Dorothy had gotten married to someone, and Elizabeth was like, I didn't want you to marry that man. I'm not happy about that. Raleigh, being like the little munchkin that he is, came up to Elizabeth and he was like, hey Elizabeth, I think Essex has brought Dorothy here to annoy you. And so nah, I don't know what he said, I wasn't there. And Elizabeth was all like, hey Dorothy, go and stay in your room for the rest of the holiday because I don't like you. And yeah, but she's the queen. She could kill Dorothy if she wanted.
That's true. I guess she's being pretty nice.
And then Essex was like, hey, Elizabeth, stop bullying my sister. And then Elizabeth insulted Lettice Knowles, Essex's mother. So they arguing, and this was their first ever argument. And then Essex was like, fine, I'll send my sister home even though it's midnight. And then he ran away to join the Dutch war.
What?
Yeah. All like same night, and he said it's better to have a beautiful death than live this wretched life. So
dramatic.
He's a drama queen. And then Elizabeth sent someone to fetch him back so he wouldn't join the war.
I'm just liking the idea of like troops in Holland all lined up ready to, you know, charge, and then this little English servant guy is just kind of winding through like, sorry, hi, do we have an Essex here? Yeah, Elizabeth wants to see it. And then the charge just being like, Jesus Christ, Essex.
Yeah, and it wasn't that far. He didn't get to Holland. He didn't leave the country.
So he was not really putting his money where his mouth was when he made that.
No, he scampered away, but he didn't go abroad.
Not Holland away.
No. I don't even know how far he got, but after this, Elizabeth awarded Essex Leicester's titles Master of the Horse and Knight of the Garter, which sounds ruder than it is, I think. I think he was one of her like private knight people.
Okay.
He guarded her person, and I think he helped her off her horse. Essex convinced Elizabeth to help the King of France when he was in a bit of a pickle. I think it was a revolt of some kind. And another quote from Lytton, he begged to be put in command of the force. He knelt for 2 hours, still she refused, then suddenly consented. Now, I would argue that if a man knelt before me for 2 hours and begged to go into battle, eventually I'd be like, okay, fine, go.
I can see how that would wear you down.
So the whole time this is going on, Essex has a rivalry with the Cecil faction, and there's like all factions at court, and Elizabeth has all of them on the Privy Council, so then she can listen to all the arguments and then make a decision.
Makes sense.
And so he's on the Privy Council now in 1593. Meanwhile, in Ireland, there was the 9-Year War, which started in 1594. England versus the Irish clans. England controlled Dublin and the Pale, which is where the phrase beyond the Pale comes from.
No.
Fun fact. So
that's really cool.
The Pale's kind of like the surrounding towns of Dublin, and then the rest is clan land.
Okay. Would going beyond the Pale, is that like, oh, you've gone too far, as in like if they try to invade beyond the Pale, it would be like, no, that's not your land?
Yeah, and there's this one guy called O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, who comes back into prominence later. So Elizabeth said to Essex, I'm going to send your uncle to Ireland. And Essex is like, oh, please don't send my uncle to Ireland because then I won't have any friends at court.
Oh, no.
Essex is like, please don't send one of my allies, send one of Cecil's allies instead. And then they argue, and this is where it gets so dramatic. They're all like, Elizabeth and Essex are having an argument. Essex turns his back on the Queen.
Oh no.
And then the book said she boxed his ears, which I believe means punched him in the head.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. And then Essex put his hand to his sword.
Whoa, man.
In the presence of the Queen.
Yeah, but whoa.
We don't draw our sword to the Queen.
Well, I mean, he hadn't paid much attention to that before, to be fair.
I know, I was
All that
thinking
card
that
playing.
too. He shouted in her face, "This is an outrage that I will not put up with." And then he ran away again.
Oh, okay.
He's so annoying, isn't he?
Yes. So the outrage that he wouldn't put up with was the fact that she wouldn't agree to send one of his enemy's friends somewhere else rather than his friend.
Yes, and also Elizabeth was a clever woman, so she would have known what he was doing.
Yes.
The important part of this is that Elizabeth did not retaliate. People expected her to throw him in the Tower of London, to remove his position, but she did nothing. She was like,
Silent
cool,
treatment.
That's fine with me. Try and stab me. Elizabeth kept nagging on about the issue in Ireland, and Essex was friends with Bacon, the man, and Bacon also was a bit of an idiot, and he said, why don't you tell Elizabeth that you'll go to Ireland so she doesn't think that you keep wanting to send your enemies to Ireland and that actually you're willing to accept the post.
Okay, and what would that achieve?
Essex is like, oh, Elizabeth loves me so much that if I say I want to go to Ireland, she won't send me. And she'll be like, oh, well, fair enough, Essex, I will send one of Cecil's men.
Because now I see that you would be willing to as well. I see.
He's like, oh, it's not because I think Ireland's rubbish. I love Ireland. I want to be there myself, but I just can't leave court. Elizabeth sent him to Ireland.
Yeah, I thought she might.
The way it went down was basically they wanted a guy called Mountjoy to go, and Essex then was like, wait, competition, but I want to be the best, and started advocating for himself to be sent to Ireland, even though he didn't want to go, just because he didn't want other people to be like above him.
Better at going to Ireland than him.
Yes, and so she sent him to Ireland. She was like, okay, great, if you want to go so much. He went to Ireland. He lost quite a lot of battles. I couldn't really find a lot of information on them, and to be honest, I couldn't really be bothered because they're not that interesting. Tyrone took pity on him, it seems, and said, oh, please, can we have a parley and we'll just have a little chat.
Yeah, oh, that's nice.
So Essex goes to this meeting, and he agreed a truce with Tyrone, which you would think is all great and lovely, but the entire time he's been in Ireland, he's been ignoring Elizabeth's messages.
Oh no!
He even sent one of his friends back to England to be like, listen, Elizabeth, I know he's ignoring you, but it's what he's doing and this is what's happening. And she was like, I am the Queen.
So did Elizabeth not consent to this parley?
No. And he agreed a treaty with an Irish rebel.
Oh my God.
That he didn't have permission to be making a treaty with. He shouldn't have been doing it. The way they saw it was that he was basically fraternizing with the rebels at this point.
Well, yeah.
There's another fun point of this where he found out that Cecil got a job he wanted and threatened to take the English army out of Ireland back to England to fight Robert Cecil.
Wow.
So to have a civil war.
I love that he thought that the army were that loyal to him specifically as well. Like if he's like, okay guys, forget this whole Irish war. This person got my job, and then they'll just
exactly.
Wow.
And just you wait, because he continues to think this. Excellent. So he makes the treaty. He's not allowed, and then he is like, "Oh, this isn't going well for me," and Elizabeth's angry with me, and I think she's going to be more angry with me because I've just done this thing. So he hurries back to England because he wants to explain all of his failures to Elizabeth before someone else could.
Okay, reasonable.
So he races back to England. A guy from Cecil's faction sees him arrive and he's like, whoa, I'm going to go tell the Queen that you're here before you can tell the Queen, and there's going to be drama. So they're like galloping on their little horses trying to get there first, and the Cecil guy gets there first and goes to tell Cecil, and Cecil's like, don't worry about it, and then just stays in his office.
Oh, lucky for Essex.
Essex, in a state of disarray, he's covered in mud, probably blood from the battlefield, bursts into Elizabeth's private bedchamber.
Whoa. Where
she's in a state of undress.
Oh no.
No makeup, no wig. And she's with her ladies in waiting, getting ready for the day. Essex is like, hey, Elizabeth, let me tell you this. And she's like, I'm naked. Please leave. So they meet up for dinner. Elizabeth is like, the Privy Council needs to hear what you've done in Ireland because it is a mess.
Yeah.
So they have a Privy Council meeting to discuss Essex's antics in Ireland, making a truce with the rebels, which only lasted 6 weeks. So it's not even like a good truce.
No.
The Privy Council decide to place Essex under house arrest because he can't be trusted. No. And some people were thinking that he'd returned from Ireland victorious, and he was getting letters like, oh, good job in Ireland, like lots of love. And he was reading them like, oh no, I did a horrible job in Ireland, and probably like weeping into the letters. Then Elizabeth had him brought up in front of the council in the Star Chamber, which is so Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like too much fantasy, but like, cool.
Yeah, and it was declared that he had mismanaged the Irish operations, he had made a disgraceful treaty with Tyrone, and he had returned to England contrary to the express orders from Elizabeth.
Yeah, that sounds completely fair.
That was what they said. And he was kept under house arrest, and he had a monopoly on sweet wines, which was taken away from him. Elizabeth, because she's a Tudor, was like, I don't think this is enough of a punishment. No. And she organised a fun little event where Essex was made to kneel before a bunch of men, where they lectured him about what he'd done wrong for 11 hours.
Oh my god, that's such a bizarre punishment. Yeah, but also like the ultimate humiliation. Like, no, I'm not going to behead you like you're an actual threat. I'm just going to treat you like a 5-year-old who's done something stupid.
And then he was made to apologise afterwards. That was his initial issue.
Right.
Essex was like, this has all gone horribly wrong for me. Yeah. What a mess. So he got in contact with Mountjoy, the guy who was originally going to go to Ireland in his place. Elizabeth's now sending Mountjoy to Ireland. And Mountjoy, who also seems to be an idiot, says, shall we write to James up in Scotland, the Scottish king, son of Mary, Queen of Scots, who Elizabeth beheaded. So, you know, he's not in the best position.
James I goes on to become the first Stuart, right?
Yes. And go you!
I did geography, guys.
So they write to James to say, please join forces with us. We need to protect your inheritance of the throne because the Cecils don't want you. And James is like, I don't know, guys. Basically trying not to get caught in a plot against the Queen because his mum was murdered by her. Essex. Now, I don't know any of the planning that led up to this, but Essex, his friends who had fabulous names, Sir Gelly Merrick was one. Henry Cuff, not so good, but we like Gelly Merrick. They gather in Essex House, and Gelly is all like, I don't like how Elizabeth has been treating you. I am gonna stir some things up. And so then it's like
the classic girl sleepover, punish the ex thing.
Yes,
right,
exactly. He goes down to the Lord Chamberlain's men, William Shakespeare's lads.
Yes, indeed.
And he says, please will you put on a play of Richard II to remind the public that a monarch can be deposed. Excuse me.
Now that's
Excuse
a zinger.
me, Gelly. This is not the plan. We like Elizabeth, but not Gelly. And Elizabeth, here's my Elizabeth quote, said, I am Richard II. Drama. And Elizabeth is saying, hey, lads, I'm not falling for any of this. I know that you've put this play on to make me feel scared.
Oh, so she's like, oh, yes, that's the parallel.
Yes, she's like, okay, boys, well done. You've made your point now.
I see.
I'm still the Queen. So Essex and around 200 to 300 soldiers began gathering at Essex House. I don't know how he got them, because it wasn't like Facebook. But
especially if it's like kind of secret. Just 200 or 300 soldiers just kind of...
Well, the court knew.
Ah, okay.
They were watching all of these little soldiery men, and also Essex like sneaking to the market to buy like a spear. Like they knew. So Essex was ordered to attend the council. They were like, hey, Essex, would you mind just popping in for a second? We just want to have a chat. So Essex was like, I'm not going to go because they're going to arrest me. And so 4 councillors came to Essex House to be like, hey, Essex, how are you doing? They were captured by Essex's men. All of his followers were like, let's kill these guys. And Essex was like, ooh.
So he wasn't trying to start a rebellion, but he was just trying to protect himself, which went against everything.
I don't think that you gather 200 to 300 soldiers in your house if you're not trying to start something.
It's a good point. Go on.
I think he basically wanted these guys to rescue Elizabeth from the Cecils, but I don't know whether that was what he told people afterwards that he was doing. They all got really hyper about capturing these 4 men, and they flooded out of Essex House, and they were like, where are we going to go? And Essex was like, to the city. And then they marched up to London. They entered the city through Ludgate. The council had sent word to the street preachers beforehand and had said, everyone stay inside and don't listen to Essex. And so people, they saw him coming and they closed their shutters against him. So Essex was walking through the streets of London shouting, for the Queen, the crown is sold to the Spaniards, a plot is laid for my life. I don't understand what his problem with Spain was. I think it's because they were Catholic at the time and England wasn't. I also don't know why he thought people were going to kill him. Maybe because he was called to court.
Yeah. He seems like quite a paranoid sort of fella.
Yeah. So
and then again, he'd also really screwed up.
At this point, this is him being like, I am going to rescue Elizabeth from the Cecils and then she will love me. I don't get why he thought raising an army against her would make her fancy him.
I don't know. It seems to be a weirdly common thing in this era, and I don't know why they didn't learn.
A bit of advice for anyone listening out there. If you
looking to get into the dating game.
Yeah, if you fancy a girl and she's not being massively interested, don't raise an army against her and march through London with them towards her house.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
As he walked down Cheapside, all men could see that he was in desperation. The sweat poured from his face, which contorted with horror. He knew it at last. He was ruined. His whole life had crashed to pieces in this hideous fiasco. Another quote from Lytton. Essex again tried to run away when he realised that things were against him.
From his own stampede.
His own stampede. It was going badly because basically the bishop had got involved now, and he had gathered soldiers and townspeople to put chains across the walkways so Essex can get through. His men charged and they lost, and so
because there was a chain in the way.
And also the Bishop of London.
Yeah,
which,
you know it's bad when the bishop gets involved.
You know it's bad when a bishop gets involved is not a good quote. Some people like bishops.
If the bishop is against you and the bishop wields a lot of power over the capital city, that is bad.
That is bad. So Essex tried to run away back to Essex House. He got in a boat and rowed himself back to Essex House. He then barricaded himself into his house with some of his soldiers.
And the rest of them were just in the streets like, where's Essex? Oh no.
I think he left most of them in London with the bishop against them, and they all got arrested and put in prison. He barricaded himself inside Essex House. The Lord Admiral came along and was like, knock, knock, knock. And Essex was like, you're not allowed in, you're the Admiral.
Yeah,
and the Admiral said, if you don't come out, I'm going to blow up your house. And he said, I would have done it earlier, but I thought there might be women inside. So,
what's convinced him that there are now no women inside?
I don't know. Maybe they all ran away.
A steady stream of women were coming out of one of the windows. And you just figured that's probably all of them.
That's probably all the women out of Essex House. And now I'm going to threaten to blow it up.
As opposed to come in through the window and get Essex. That's effort, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, let's not criticise the Lord Admiral, who may or may not have seen a stream of women leaving the house. Yeah,
I guess we can't base our knowledge of a man on his maybe having seen a stream of women.
Yeah, that we've made up the stream of women. There probably weren't a stream of women. And I don't even know, based on the facts that Lytton has given me previously, whether he even said the thing about the women.
Oh, I do hope so.
He was like, okay, don't blow up my house, I'll come out. And he was taken to the Tower of London. Elizabeth signed his death warrant.
Oh no.
And then she was like, oh, don't kill him. And then she was like, oh, wait, no, I've got to kill him. Okay, kill him. Which she did before as well. She'd sign things, death warrants, and she'd be like, okay, kill them. And then 5 seconds later, she'd be like, no, I changed my mind. And then she'd be like, okay, no, it's a rebel.
She'd send a I'm really sorry cupcake and a noose.
Probably. Or she was probably just like, do kill them after all.
Again, We can't theorise based on hypothetical cupcakes, but she might have done it.
I love the idea of the executioner being like, okay, Elizabeth, once I've done this, it's
no
done.
take back
So
twos.
are you sure? And she's like, yes, kill them. And she's like, wait a second, no, don't. I just like the idea of that.
Yeah, it would be, God, imagine how stressful it would be being the executioner.
Because also imagine if she's like, kill them, and then you like, whoop, and then their head's gone. And then she's like, oh,
wait,
you know that one guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, ooh,
Can try and glue their head back on, ma'am, but...
Essex was executed in private as per his request. At the Tower of London. He did a little speech where he was like, oh, I'm really sorry for what I've done. And yes, I did do it, but I didn't want to kill the Queen, just so you all know. And he also said that he was a very sinful man, which we all knew. Yeah, he was
all
like...
that cards.
Quote from Essex, I think he said something like, I've done more sins in my life than I have hairs on my head. So...
Blimey.
Yeah, but they thought, like, I don't know, sneezing was a sin.
Yeah, that's true.
He wore red. He wore a little red outfit, which Mary Queen of Scots also wore red, and it's the colour of Catholic martyrs. I don't think he was a Catholic martyr.
No.
I think he was probably misguided in why he was wearing red.
Yeah, maybe he was just like, I've seen the head choppings, and
yeah,
it seems to be quite a red do.
Yeah. A red do. I think the theme is generally red. And then I've written in my notes, 3 whacks, and he was dead.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's the life of Robert Devereux.
Fabulous.
He fascinates me.
Having heard all that, I agree with your diagnosis of massive idiot. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about Grigori Rasputin, who many of you will probably know from the song, from the legend, from the mad monk with the weird starry eyes and the yucky neck beard. He was quite a big cheese in Russia. He was born to an illiterate farming family in a Siberian peasant village in 1869, so quite humble origins. But from his childhood, he claimed to have healing powers and to be able to see visions of the future.
I love that for him.
I know, straight away, he's like, well, I've not got, I don't know if this was his thought process, again.
We know all their thoughts.
Yeah. He's not educated. His family, fun fact, were known for being horse thieves, which is quite funny. He's like, what can I do? The occult's quite in right now. I can do it all. Skip forward a little bit. 1887, he marries. He has 3 kids. After a little while, I think he's 28 at the time, he decides to go off and be a monk because he thinks that's what he's for. It's not like marriage anymore. So he starts studying at St. Nicholas Monastery. But after a while of that, he realises he doesn't want to be an Orthodox monk. So he decides to walk home through the Siberian woods with, bears and wolves and cold. And not much is known about what he did in his wandering. There was about 3 years where he's sort of unaccounted for. He presumably finds a people called the Kilusks, who were a sex cult, an offshoot of Russian Orthodox Church, who believed that they could only achieve salvation through sinning. So basically what they would do was they'd have big old dance parties, and when they felt drunk with the Holy Spirit, they'd have an orgy.
Is this true?
It's speculated by most historians, according to a source.
Wikipedia.
No, it's not Wikipedia. It's YouTube. But you know what? I found this in several places, so I'm going to believe it. Either way, what's for sure is that in around 1900, when he returns to his own village, he starts initiating a similar sex cult himself in his dad's basement.
Imagine your dad being like, hi Rasputin, and he turns the lights on, and it's just like, this cult.
Welcome, father. It was apparently at this point, when he returned from his wanderings, that he came back changed. He had his signature scruffy beard and his starry eyes. If you look at any picture of Rasputin, he's absolutely terrifying.
He's a scary looking man.
He's a scary looking man. And yeah, he starts his own cult where he has sex with the congregation in his dad's basement. And
a lot of cults are based off of that, aren't they?
Yeah.
If you're wondering if you're in a cult, if the head priest guy is like, every night everyone sleeps with the head priest guy, it's probably a cult.
Around 1904, he gets a dream where the Virgin Mary goes, the royal family need you! And he wakes up and goes, oh, I guess the royal family need me. And he goes to St. Petersburg. Where in 1905, he is introduced to Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra, his wife. They have a son called Alexei who has haemophilia. which is being kept a secret, which makes them really fear for his life, obviously, because haemophilia, for anyone who doesn't know, is when your blood has trouble clotting. And in 1906, Alexandra hires Rasputin to help using his magic healing powers. Long story short, Alexei kind of ends up getting better. There are a few instances, it's all a bit back and forth. He gets banished briefly by the Tsar.
Rasputin or Alexei?
Rasputin. Not
Right, okay.
Alexei's cool.
You have a son who's got a medical condition and you're like,
banish him.
Alexei, I'm kind of sick of you, go away. But we'll keep Rasputin here because we really like his beard.
He's like the family pet. Rasputin is briefly banished and sends some letters back and forth to Alexandra, who's still very much under his thrall, but he keeps being called back because Alexei keeps getting cuts, as you do when you're a child. And every time he manages to save him, which is probably because he stopped Alexei from taking aspirin. But Rasputin was very happy to put that down to his being a magic healing man. He was also at this time heavily rumoured to be the lover of the Russian queen.
Hence the song.
Since the haemophilia was a secret, and so publicly people were just seeing this guy being the new confidant of Tsarina Alexandra and putting two and two together. Yeah, throughout this time, Rasputin was continuing with his sex cult stuff, which was now kind of more among the nobility. Women would gather in his chambers to hear him speak. Once he had leverage over the royal family, having helped with Alexei's haemophilia, he most probably had access to Alexandra and possibly their daughters, which is horrific. And he was very, very popular among the people who believed in his miracles. Quite a lot of people started genuinely fearing that he was the devil.
That is a reputation.
He didn't help with that perception of himself, because he wrote in his diary that he was in an ongoing battle with the devil, and what he would do to try and make sure that he succeeded in this battle was to deliberately expose himself to sort of sinful situations and let the dark side out and then overcome it, which was basically an excuse for him to beat up a lot of prostitutes. He was believed to be the devil by some. Others thought he was the second coming of Christ. There was a woman who actually lived with him for a while, convinced that he was Christ, and then she ended up in a mental asylum. He also claimed kisses as payments. He was blackmailing the royal family, obviously, into doing whatever he wanted. And he didn't wash at all, which is a choice for yourself, but when your job is sleeping with people, personal hygiene maybe would help. He bragged apparently about wearing the same pants for 6 months. Just a really, not only a horrible guy, also weird.
This man, basically his job is to take his pants off, and yet not once does he, because if you're like, oh well, you know, I only really have a wee, so it's not like I take them off that much, so it's quite easy to keep them on. But his job is taking them off, so in no point was he like, I've taken them off now, so maybe I should put some new ones on.
See, I think that was seen as a part of his charm.
I'm actually going to put a picture of Rasputin next to my computer so that I can look at him while you tell me about him.
Okay, I feel that would help. But yeah, so his abuse of women in particular didn't go unnoticed. 2 head priests in St. Petersburg cornered him one time. He was not very popular among the religious community because he hadn't completed his training as a monk. He was going around saying he was Jesus. Doing a lot of things that you shouldn't do. So yeah, 2 head priests in St. Petersburg, they corner him and they say it's just the best intervention ever. I'm not sure exactly what they were trying to achieve. What they do is they grab his penis and they scream that he's the Antichrist, and then they get a crucifix and start just kind of bashing him around with it a bit.
The monks have gone for an approach no one should ever go for.
Yes, obviously, you should never grab people's areas without their express consent. It is a really interesting intervention. Unfortunately, it didn't make Rasputin have a think. He just went and told the Tsarina, and she was like, well, banish those monks. And they did. So not a lot came of it. This is where we get to the first assassination attempt on Grigori Rasputin. In July 1914, a priest called Ilidor, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing all these names, thought he was the devil, as many people did. So he sent a prostitute to stab Rasputin in the gut, which she does. She really does. She stabs him and then like pulls his intestines out a bit and then runs off.
That's a nightmare.
It is a bit of a nightmare. He's fine. He goes to hospital. They stitch him up. He's all good. In August of that same year, so this is in 1914, World War I breaks out. And he is convalescing and he writes to the Tsar like, oh, we shouldn't have a war, which, I mean, he's right about that.
It's the only good thing Rasputin said so far.
Yeah, the only good thing Rasputin's ever done. The Tsar goes to war anyway. So then Rasputin writes to him like, oh, well, why don't you take charge of the Russian troops? Which he does, leaving Tsarina Alexandra in charge, which is basically just leaving Rasputin in charge. He's out of hospital by this point, 1915 now. He's just pulling the strings of Russia, basically, and people are starting to cotton on to this. In 1916, the Duma, which is the state assembly, it's kind of like a lower form of government, a guy called Vladimir Purishkevich says that Rasputin is a puppet master and Russia is under his manipulative influence and he needs to be stopped. In November of that year, Alexandra's nephew-in-law, bearing in mind Rasputin is aware that people are starting to dislike him, and he says to Alexandra, if anyone in your family kills me, I'm going to put a curse on you that will last 2 years. Like, it wasn't forevermore. Cut to November 1916. Alexandra's nephew-in-law, Felix Yusupov, conspires with Purishkevich, who is the guy who declaimed him as a puppet master in the Duma, and also a guy called Pavlovich. There we are. To murder Rasputin. They basically think that Alexandra, who is German-born, has been swayed by Rasputin, and the two of them are planning on making peace with Germany. Everything that comes after this, we only really know from Yusupov's account. So he may have been elaborating on things. The other two conspirators also kind of weighed in. But again, just bear that in mind. We don't have an objective witness in this, really.
Okay.
Yes. December 29th, into the morning of December 30th. 1916. It's 12:30 a.m. and Yusupov collects Rasputin from his, house, and he goes, my wife Irina, my really hot wife Irina. And Rasputin's like, yeah, she's hot. And Yusupov goes, wow, she's a nymphomaniac and she needs your healing touch. Do you want to come to my basement? Now, Rasputin's past in basements hasn't been good. His future in basements will not be good.
It's been positive for him.
Been positive for him. I guess it's a bit of karma, really. But yeah, he happily goes to this basement where he's got some cakes and wine set out, all of which are heavily laced with cyanide. The other two conspirators, so Pavlovich and Purishkevich, are waiting upstairs, where they've put on a record because Irina is not home, and they want to convince Rasputin that she is home, but she's entertaining upstairs, so she'll come down later.
Is this a record of music, or is it her voice being like, oh, what a lovely evening we're having?
No, I wish it was that. I can tell you what it was, actually. It was I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy by George M. Cohen.
Okay.
So there are 3 cakes, there are 2 glasses of wine, all of them heavily laced with cyanide. Rasputin initially is like, no, I don't really want a cake. I'm not much of a sweet tooth. And so Yusupov briefly runs upstairs and is like, Rasputin's not eating. I don't know what to do. The other's like, go down. So he goes back down. Rasputin's like, change my mind. I'm eating the cake. So it's quite an easy one.
He's got the crumbs in his beard.
Yeah, he's just like, what will you say? Nothing happens. Bearing in mind, cyanide is supposed to have immediate effect. Yusupov's like, it's okay. We'll start on the wine. Once he's got the wine in his system as well, he's got to go.
Right.
He drinks the wine, 2 big-ass glasses of wine. Nothing happens. They chat. At one point, Rasputin spots a guitar and is like, oh, Yusupov, do you play guitar? Can you give us a melody?
Such a good time.
He's just having a lovely little night. At this point, it's about 2:30 in the morning. Rasputin is fine, and Yusupov is still playing the frigging guitar. So he's like, look, I need to go upstairs. He goes up, he gets a pistol.
So this is like, when someone's around your house and you're kind of expecting them just to come for a couple of hours.
Oh, and then
they just won't go.
That's exactly it. Only
they're like,
going is being dead in this instance.
He won't die.
The frustration is so real in this account. It's Pavlovich's pistol. He's like, mate, he won't die. Give me a pistol. Takes the pistol, returns downstairs. Rasputin, when he comes downstairs, is admiring a nice little ebony cabinet. He's got to his feet.
There's so much stuff in this basement.
I know. It's a nice basement. He's having it refurbished.
Is Rasputin not like, hey, I came to see your wife. I've been here for 2 hours.
Yeah,
just wondering.
You would think, I guess he's just having such a nice time with the cake and the wine and the nice music that
it's a date.
To him, he's been a great host. Not so much in a moment. Yusupov goes, look at the crucifix and pray to it, and shoots him in the chest. At which point it becomes fairly clear to Rasputin that he's not here, presumably for dinner. And so he collapses, he convulses, and then he lies still. The conspirators check on him. They're like, he's dead. Yusupov remarked, that creature has swallowed enough cyanide to kill a regiment. Others say there was enough to kill a horde of elephants. I think that's an exaggeration and also not very specific. But there was a lot of cyanide.
Who has cyanided so many elephants that they could measure that?
I know. So they go upstairs and they have a drink, celebrate. 1 hour later, Yusupov, still feeling a bit edgy, let's go and check on the body. Goes downstairs, looks at it, pretty dead. He shakes it, there's no response. He's like, right, okay, I'm just being silly. He goes to turn away. Rasputin's eye flickers open and he lunges at Yusupov, gets his hands around his throat and everything. Yusupov pulls free, runs upstairs and is going, oh my God, he's still alive. He's the literal devil, somebody help. Purishkevich hears this commotion and runs downstairs to the basement. Rasputin's gone. He's halfway across the courtyard. And
he's just running.
Yeah, he's fine. He's just running. According to Purishkevich, as he's doing this, he's going, Felix, I'll tell everything to the Tsarina. So he's just goading them. Again,
I love that.
We only have their report for this. And I don't know why Rasputin would say this when he's very much not out of firing range. But supposedly this is what happened.
Well, also, I've just looked up the symptoms of cyanide poisoning, and it's like nausea, headache, like lethargy, and then it's like cardiac arrest. So
it's very quick as well.
Well, but even if it wasn't, because I was thinking like, oh, well, you know, if he's a big guy, he's not as big as a whole entire army regiment, but still, like, you know, if he's a bigger guy, it might work slower on him.
Yeah.
But if he's like skipping across a courtyard,
I know. Having also been shot, like, it's just
I forgot about that.
It's a whole lot of impossible. So Purishkevich shoots after him twice. He misses. He shoots twice more and he hits him both times, once in the back, once in the head. So he's now been shot in the chest, the back and the head, and he's consumed enough cyanide to apparently kill a regiment.
He should be dead.
He's pretty dead, except that he's not. He starts to crawl away.
I love that image. Not of a man who's been shot trying to crawl, but Rasputin.
He won't die. He starts to crawl away. Yusupov, by this point, catches up, as does Pavlovich. They start beating Rasputin with iron bars until he's bloodied and senseless. They're like, okay, he is for sure dead. We've shot him 3 times. He's had so much cyanide, and now we've bludgeoned him with iron bars. He has to be dead. They bind his limbs with rope. They wrap him in a heavy cloth. They throw the body off a bridge and into the Nevka River. They're like, Jesus Christ, that was a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. Let's all go home and just try and forget about this. Yeah, the next morning, the body is found. He's dead. They get an autopsy. The autopsy reveals water in his lungs. He died from drowning in the river after having been shot 3 times, all the cyanide, and being beaten to death.
Aside from the cyanide, which... Yeah. I'm sort of like, okay, well, he should have died from the cyanide. But aside from that, I could see how someone wouldn't die immediately from gunshot and so would still be breathing shallowly whilst in a river.
But it's just so many unlikely things.
It's so many.
It wasn't like he was shot in the arm. He was shot in the face. According to the autopsy, so he had the 3 bullet wounds in him confirmed. He had a small amount of water in his lungs. And no poison was found in his system.
Yeah, what if, when Rasputin was like, no, I don't want a cake, he knew they were poisoned, and he knew, like, half was for him and half was for the other guy. And then when that guy went upstairs, a switcheroo.
Ooh, now that would make a lot of sense, except that Yusupov survived World War One. One of my favourite things is sort of the way that the murderers tried to cover their tracks, because they really tried, but they were so stupid. So initially, like, they had plans in advance. So they went, when they said, hey, Rasputin, do you want to come to Yusupov's basement? They went, don't tell anybody, which is suspicious and weird.
Please come to my basement, don't tell anyone. I would tell people and not go.
And not go, exactly. Rasputin went, but he did tell people. He told his daughter and another woman. They also went, we'll meet him out the back door rather than the front door so people don't see him leave. Met him out the back door. The maid is watching out the window the whole time, going, it's Yusupov. And then they were going to call into a restaurant once they'd killed him and go, hey, has our friend Rasputin arrived yet? No, weird, to kind of make it sound like they were expecting him to be somewhere. Whether or not they did that in the chaos that ensued, I don't know. Some reports say that they dressed one of the men, I couldn't find which one it was, in Rasputin's clothes, drive back to his home, so it looks like he's returned that night. I don't know when they found time to do that. Sources differ. At the point at which Purishkevich is shooting willy-nilly into the courtyard, the police obviously hear the gunshots, and Purishkevich is going, oh God, the police have heard the gunshots, what do we do? And they're like, just say it was a car backfiring. So Purishkevich is like, yeah, good plan. He goes to the door, and instead of doing that, he goes, do you know who I am? I'm Purishkevich. And he says, Rasputin's dead, and if you know what's good for you, you'll shut up about it.
No, don't.
Yeah. And the policeman's like, yeah, of course I'll shut up about it. obviously goes and tells his superiors immediately.
What an idiot.
I know, and they don't do anything about it that night. But when they are looking for the body, Yusupov goes, there's a lot of blood out in my yard where we bludgeoned him to death. I know, I'll kill a dog and put it on the blood. Just unnecessary. He says when the police arrive, he says, one of my party thought it would be funny to shoot a dog. They're like, okay, so firstly, there's way too much blood for this dog. Secondly, we heard 4 gunshots. And thirdly, your mate Purishkevich literally told us that it was him killing Rasputin last night.
And also, would not people have heard the second lot of gunshots when he was shooting the dog? So then the police are asking the neighbours, and they're like, did you hear any gunshots? And they're like, yes, we heard 4 last night, and also
one
2 this
accompanied
morning.
By a bark. So basically the end of that is there was no trial because Yusupov was the nephew of the Tsar, and they wanted to just kind of hash it up a bit. Both he and Pavlovich survived World War One. I think Yusupov was exiled, but he was really okay. Pavlovich was sent to join the army briefly. I don't know what happened to Purishkevich, but since he literally went up to the police and went, just shot Rasputin, I can imagine that if any of them did get punished, it was probably him. That is how Rasputin, hopefully, finally Ruddy died.
I'm blown away.
Isn't it crazy?
I'm in shock. I didn't realise that most of it was all in one night, and these 3 guys, well, 4, one of them had a worse night than everyone else, but these 3 guys had a horrible night.
They thought, my favourite bit, and again, I'm aware that someone died here, but it was a long time ago and it was an evil man, and so I'm just going with it. Just the idea that Yusupov is there in his basement, he thinks he's going to give Rasputin a cake. He's going to take a bite. It's going to be a little bit nasty for a few seconds and then it'll be over. And then 2 hours later, he finds himself playing Ed Sheeran on the guitar. Rasputin's eaten all of his food and he's drunk all his nice wine and he just won't die.
I think we've pretty much
concluded. Yeah, that's
got the history there.
Yeah,
that's the history.
Know your thoughts.
Thank you very much for listening to the Other Marthas podcast. Subscribe to our channel if you would like to hear us talk about more things that we are completely unqualified to talk about.